Progressive forces or tools for hidden agendas. The role of some non-governmental organizations or NGOs has once again come under the spotlight following a recent High Court ruling by the Pretoria High Court allowing 22 Afghan asylum seekers into South Africa. Home Affairs Minister Dr. Arun Motsoaledi was scathing in his criticism of the Lifeline Foundation, an NGO representing these asylum seekers, accusing them of using South Africa's laws to undermine the country's sovereignty. In this episode, we are asking, are some NGOs abusing South African laws for ulterior agendas? Let's welcome our guest this evening. A bit later on, we'll be joined by Patriotic Alliance leader Gayton McKenzie, and also joined in studio by David Loxton, who is the representative and lawyer for the 22 Afghan asylum seekers. We extended an invitation to the Home Affairs Department as well as the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs in Parliament. Both are unfortunately not available. Remember that you can be part of the conversation on our social media pages. You can find us on Twitter. It is at Unfiltered SABC, and on Facebook, it is Unfiltered SABC. Good evening, and thank you so much for making time for us this.
Good evening, pleasure.
Who is Lifeline Foundation, first of all?
It's a non-profit organization based in the USA, and one of their roles is assisting individuals in Afghanistan who are being persecuted by the Taliban. Mm-hmm. And as we know, this case is about 22 such individuals.
Yeah. Was the organization set up with that purpose solely, or is this other work that the organization is doing?
No, it's other work it's doing as well. So it's not the sole purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay. It is. There are certain members of the organization who are ex-vets. And so they've had personal experience from the US side. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, one of their sort of ways of paying back to the community.
And then how did you get involved in this case?
That's a very, very difficult question to answer, in the sense that I'm a partner in a firm and one of my partners engaged, and then he pulled me into the assignment. So I didn't personally engage with the organization. So I actually can't answer that question. My apologies.
Okay. But do you know about an application that came back in 2021 already for over 126 Afghan nationals to apply for asylum here in South Africa?
No. Was that through the same organization and the Lifeline? No.
You don't know about that?
No, I don't know about that.
Okay,
no.
So the only one that you know of is the 22?
Correct.
Who are these 22 Afghan nationals?
So the 22, and you must accept that we came in very much at the last minute. And so a lot of the instructions I got was by WhatsApp messages and sort of working remotely. Mm-hmm. But the 22, as I understand it, are individuals who worked for the US when the US was occupying Afghanistan. And they were assisting in US hospitals. And then they also assisted the US when the United States pulled out of Afghanistan. Yeah. And it was as a result of that that the Taliban then took out what we can call a hit on the individuals concerned. Now, having said that, 14 of the individuals are children, and one's a 6-month-old baby. So they are in this matter by virtue of them having parents who are working for the US government. Obviously, 10-year-old kids are not going to work in US hospitals. So that is who they are. Yeah.
And according to their knowledge, when did they first become aware of being on a hit list of the Taliban?
That was some 18 months ago.
That was some 18 months ago. So back in 2021 already?
Yes.
Approximately?
Yeah, that's my understanding, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then after this hit list was now out and they became aware of their lives being under threat, then what happened?
So then they were taken with the assistance of Lifeline to Pakistan. And they were...
back in 2021 already?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So they're in Pakistan, but they were given visas which only allowed them to be there for a limited period of time. And it was towards the end of that particular period. And also, whilst that period was running, there were some, I think, as I understand it, disastrous events there where there were hits on people in Pakistan. So the Lifeline formed a view that they needed to get the individuals out of Pakistan for their own safety, and secondly also to reset their visas, because they didn't want them being in Pakistan when their visas expired, which would have then meant they would have been sent back to Afghanistan. Yeah. So from there they were sent to Zimbabwe. And the idea was that they'd been through horrible experience for a number of months, being hunted, and having seen some traumatic incidents in Pakistan. The idea was send them to Zimbabwe for something totally different. They can have a 2-week safari, try and help them get back to normal. But the objective was not to then stay in Zimbabwe, simply a 2-week safari, and from there they would seek asylum.
You seek asylum where?
So what happened was that was when we became involved. So the approach came, and based on our knowledge of the South African law, our Immigration Act, and also by dint of the fact that our ANC government, many of their shall we call them doyens, themselves had used refugee status over the years when they were in the dark days of apartheid, were being hunted by the security forces. They were given asylum and refugee status in various neighboring countries. So we thought, in consultation with Lifeline, that if anybody would understand what it's like to be a refugee and would come to the assistance of individuals, it would be our government. Plus, South Africa had signed the international or subscribed to the International Convention, and we'd put into place immigration laws which essentially protect asylum seekers. So, but in consultation, we said, well, our advice as lawyers was, look, everything's in their favor. The law's on their side. The government understands refugee status, having themselves been through it in the days of apartheid, and to us it just made eminent sense. Plus, from Lifeline's side, they view South Africa as a beautiful country with with infrastructure to assist people. So it was pretty much a no-brainer to come here.
And what's the explanation around the tourism visa that they received in Zambia?
Well, that was in desperation, because what happened was things didn't work out the way we expected. And
didn't work out when?
So I was actually there. I was on site. It would have been last Thursday. When the individual Afghans came across the border from Zimbabwe, they were then turned back by the Home Affairs Department, and there was quite a lot of toing and froing. But essentially, I and one of my colleagues were trying our best to persuade the officials to allow them to stay based on the law. It became clear that they were not going to be allowed to stay. And in fact, the whole message we got was they're going to go back to Zimbabwe. From there, they're going to go back to Afghanistan, and then it'll be tickets. So we battled for, I think, 2 or 3 days to try and resolve this. And then we weren't involved in this particular aspect. That was done at a different level, I think through Lifeline and their contacts. They managed to persuade the Zambian government to save these people, because they were about to be put on a plane to Kabul. The plane was leaving at 11 o'clock in the morning, and they then managed to prevail upon the Zambian government, saying, look, the South Africans are hopefully sorting it out, give them a 30-day tourist visa just to spare their lives and give them some comfort. So that was why they got that visa.
So the tourism visa is a visa that only came after the Thursday, not that it was already there.
No. It was
because the impression that we got from the ministry is that these Afghan nationals were already in Zambia as well as Zimbabwe.
No, I'm afraid. I think the minister must have been misled. That's definitely not the case. I was on site in Beitbridge. I'm telling you firsthand exactly how it happened, how it panned out.
Okay, so we continue the conversation right here on Unfiltered with me, Aldrin St. Pierre. Remember that you can be part of this conversation as well by using our Twitter handle, that is @UnfilteredSABC. You can also go onto our Facebook page, Unfiltered SABC. That's where you can find us, and tell us what you make of the question that we are asking you this evening. Do you believe that some NGOs are undermining the laws of this country? And do you also believe that some NGOs are tools to push a certain agenda? That conversation when we continue coming back. And welcome back to Unfiltered with me, Aldrin St. Pierre, as we look at the role of NGOs, but specifically zooming in on the story of the 22 Afghan nationals who've been seeking asylum here in South Africa. Of course, the South African government has now also gone to court to challenge and try to set aside another court order that was handed down by the Pretoria High Court, that they be allowed asylum seeker status in the country. We are joined in studio by David Loxton, who is one of the lawyers representing some of the Afghan nationals, and we hope to speak to Gayton McKenzie as soon as we get a hold of him. Of course, he's the leader of the Patriotic Alliance. So let's go back to the Thursday. The Thursday then happened, and 2 days later, was it the court case?
So the Thursday happened, and then the Friday we actually got we got the order on a very urgent basis. So essentially what happened was Thursday at about 4 o'clock, the Home Affairs officials at Beitbridge said to us, we're going to send these people back to Zimbabwe. having told us the whole day we needn't worry, we're processing the applications, they'll be processed by 3 o'clock. Then the story turned. So essentially myself and a colleague had to then leave Beitbridge. We went back to our lodge in Musina and we drafted the court papers, and we managed to get hold of a judge at 10 o'clock the next morning to stop the individuals being sent back to Zimbabwe to try and prevent that.
Yep.
So the court case was actually on the Friday. Then what happened was we got the order. The judge wasn't happy with the short notice. Because of the urgency, she said we'd actually given very short notice to the government to allow it to respond. And so she basically couched the order in a way that gave the government a chance to challenge it. And on the Saturday, we were advised by the state attorney that they'd been instructed to challenge the order. And then we were heard by a judge that afternoon, again on an urgent basis. And without going into all the legalities, there was a lot of legal argument on process, but the judge ordered the government to file their papers by Sunday evening, 7 o'clock. And the case was then heard on the Monday. And essentially that case was about the government trying to set aside the order we got on the Thursday. And we simultaneously applied for an order for contempt of court. We got the order and the government didn't comply. So, and that case is still pending. So that was argued on Monday last week, and the judge reserved judgment. It's obviously a very important matter, and we're still waiting for that.
Okay, so because the other issue is raised by the minister again is that, and I'm going to quote him here, he says that this is what I call legal ambush, where people manipulate the law and they manipulate the legal processes of the law. And this is around what he says a junior staff member was sent an email perhaps from yourself as well, as lawyers representing the 22 Afghan nationals. And he says only about 4 hours later did he realize that there's that email. What's the explanation around that?
No, again, I think the minister's been misled here, with all due respect. So what happened was, when we planned to go up to Beitbridge, rather than just rock up there, as a courtesy to the Home Affairs, we sent them an email prior to our arrival. So the day before, we sent them an email saying, we are acting for 22 individuals, we're coming up, they are coming into the country to seek asylum. The Immigration Act, and we sent them a copy of the relevant sections. And the Immigration Act gives you no discretion; they should be allowed in, but let us know if there's an issue and we need to give any other details or whatever. So it was a courtesy email to the official, and that wasn't the service of court papers or anything. It was simply saying we're coming, and these 22 individuals are coming, to give them advance notice. So that. Maybe there's a misunderstanding on the minister's side. So that was the email sent to that official. And actually, when we got to Beitbridge, he had a copy of the email on his desk. And when we said to him, have you read the email? He says, no, look, I've read it and no problems. I understand the law. So that wasn't an issue at all.
So if that wasn't an issue, then why would the minister raise it as a legal ambush?
Well, I'm suspecting, and look, I've got to speculate here, there was no ambush. So I'll take you back to the sequence. We alert the officials, the individuals come across the border. In terms of the law, we say there's no discretion, they must be allowed in. We are told that at 4 o'clock that afternoon they're going to be sent back to Zimbabwe. We advise the official. We say to him, look, you're leaving us with no option but to bring an urgent application to the High Court. And he basically says to us, we'll do what you have to. We then go back to the lodge we're staying at, draft our papers, and we serve. Now, that's not an ambush.
You served when? Was this the Friday?
The Friday, yes.
You served the Friday?
Yes.
Okay. So now we await the court outcome of this application that has been brought by the minister, and the one that you have now brought as well, in contempt of court order against application against the government. Once the order then comes out, and let's say, for instance, the order is in favor of your application, what then happens to the 22 Afghan nationals? Do they get flown back into South Africa immediately?
Well, I'm not privy to the logistics of the arrangements. I suspect they will be driven back, but that's for Lifeline is the basic coordinator of the logistics. So if they decide it'll be more expedient to fly them in, then I would imagine they'd fly them in. Our advice was to fly them in as opposed to busing them in.
Sure.
So, but they will come back to this country then.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get to is that, so once they are in South Africa, then what happens?
Okay, so the legal process is twofold. So essentially, in terms of the Immigration Act, this is where I said there's no discretion. Phase one of the process is that the individuals arrive here and they declare their intention to seek asylum. That's where we say there's no discretion. They have to be allowed in. From there, they're given 5 days. Well, that's a bit confusing because the Act says 5 days, Home Affairs Department says 14, or their website says 14. Whatever it is, there's a limited period of time for them to then lodge their proper application. And that's where the government has a discretion. So we say that that's when they can actually test the version of the individual seeking asylum and saying, well, hang on, you aren't a genuine refugee. You're pretending it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So that'll be the process. They will then be obliged to go and seek asylum properly through the relevant channels.
What do you make of the argument from the department that on the basis that they are being sought by the Taliban, therefore South Africa could be at risk as well, and that could be a reason not to grant asylum?
Well, we say that that's actually not a valid argument in the sense that the Act is peremptory. It certainly gives the government no discretion. And that goes back to after the Second World War, when there were all these displaced persons. And then the United Nations passed the convention, and South Africa then subsequently ratified that convention. So it may well be so, but that might well be an argument of the government at phase 2, when they're assessing the applications. At this stage, we say when the individual is seeking a transit visa, there is no discretion, they must be allowed in. And quite frankly, with all due respect, I don't see that as being a reason to turn them away. Because unfortunately, worldwide, refugees have this problem. That's why we have these laws allowing them in. Okay.
The conversation continues after the break. We're in conversation with David Loxton, who is one of the lawyers representing the 22 Afghanistan nationals who are seeking asylum status here in South Africa. The conversation when we come back. And welcome back to Unfiltered. As we are wrapping up now, we managed to get a hold of the spokesperson for the Patriotic Alliance, Marlon Daniels, who is joining us. So we'll hear from Marlon in the next short while. Let's just quickly take some of your tweets that you've said at Unfiltered SABC. This one from T.I. Mutlaule says, definitely, Aldrin, NGOs have anonymous donors who use them to even change and drive policies affecting the whole nation in order to suit a minority view or foreign agenda seeking to weaken the black society. And this one is Pak Nana, who says, why is the United States not taking these refugees? They use them against their own citizens, and now they don't want to take responsibility. The US must look after them in Washington. And let me just quickly ask you that question, David. Is that something that was ever raised before? Because considering that these were people who were employed by the US government while in Afghan, that considering that the USA has now pulled out, that they should now receive citizenship in the US?
No, look, I think it was discussed, but my understanding is that the decision was made that these individuals had something to offer a country like South Africa. In fact, the whole...
who decides on our behalf?
When I say decides, the non-profit Lifeline thought that if you bring in doctors and nurses into South Africa, they can help set up clinics in poor areas to assist the people. That was a discussion. It wasn't decided. Maybe I used the wrong word there.
Okay.
It was the suggestion and the discussion was this could be a win-win for both the South Africa and the individuals. So that was the approach.
Yeah. But now, considering that there is the pushback, of course, there's the legalities that are still being dealt with. Wouldn't it be prudent to have them go to the USA if the USA is willing to receive them?
Yeah, look, that again is a difficult question to answer because, as lawyers, we are creatures of instructions, and our instructions are to ensure these individuals get into South Africa. Yes.
Marlon, good evening, and thank you so much for making time for us. Just quickly, your take as the Patriotic Alliance around this issue of the 22 Afghan nationals, but also the question that we're asking in general, whether NGOs are undermining South Africa's sovereignty.
Thank you for having me. And to the point straight away, here's the thing, Alvin. Whether it is people from Zimbabwe, whether it's people from Italy, whether it's people from the States, it doesn't matter where you come from. If you are in South Africa illegally, then you must be dealt with as an illegal foreigner, as an illegal immigrant in the country. Show me one country in the world where you are allowed to go in there illegally and get the treatment from state resources for your own gain and that of whoever came with you over the fence or through the fence. It's unheard of. I've lived abroad for how many years? So how can we say that we've got a problem with foreigners? In the main, the issue are not with foreigners. It's with illegal and undocumented foreigners, and that's what it is.
But isn't the difference here with the 22 here is that they're actually trying to legalize their stay in the country by going through this process, which is now also before court?
Right. If it is before court, we'll have to wait for the outcome. For the ruling of the court and respect them, whatever the outcome is going to be. But there are too many. I mean, look, we made it very clear. We said if we have to choose between oxygen for an illegal foreigner and a South African, we'll switch the illegal foreigner's oxygen off and rather favor the South African. And we stand by that. We're not going to waver on that. But any matter before court, we'll just have to wait and see how it's going to play out.
Okay. And the question that we're asking this evening around some NGOs undermining the country's sovereignty, what's your take on that as the Patriotic Alliance?
Look, anything or anybody or anyone undermining the sovereignty of this country must be dealt with. I mean, we cannot promote lawlessness, and we cannot encourage people to undermine the sovereignty of South Africa. I mean, laws are laws.
Yeah.
The sad part is, I remember when I studied in the UK. I had to pay about 4 or 5 times the normal fee than what the UK citizens had to pay. And that is just how it rolls for being regarded as an international student.
Yeah.
Here we get people coming here. Our country is in a mess as it is. How can we can't even take care of our own citizens of South Africa. Look the state we find ourselves in. And yet we still want to make room for those illegal foreigners? No, we can't do that. We welcome foreigners, we welcome tourists. But if your time is up, your time is up. How many times didn't we have to rush because our visa runs out? And we have to respect the laws of those countries that we find ourselves in. What's different in South Africa? And lastly, the one person who tweeted about, minimizing the black society or something to that effect. Foreigners doesn't ask you whether you're black or white. If you're illegal and undocumented, you must be dealt with. It's nothing to do with black or white.
Okay, David, just quickly your closing remarks, and when can we expect the court judgment? We understand that the judge had asked for a couple of days.
Yes. Look, we obviously all, I think both sides are anxiously awaiting the outcome. We were actually hoping to get it this week, and we're still hoping for that. And I mean, I can just close by saying that as far as we're concerned, we, as South Africans, we are governed by international law. We are subject to international law, and we must abide that. We must abide our own domestic laws. That's all we're asking for.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us this evening on Unfiltered with me, Aldrin St. Pierre. See you again next week, Monday, same time, same place, right here on S3. Enjoy the rest of your evening.